A paratrooper-turned-congressman, Mr. Bolsonaro has pledged to usher in a new era of order and progress. Brazil's national motto, emblazoned on its flag, luring rich and poor voters who are fed up with endemic corruption and terrified by spiraling crime. But after years of making bellicose speeches that have often offended women, gay people and black Brazilians, as well as threatening his adversaries, Mr. Bolsonaro adopted a conciliatory tone after Sunday's result. Jair Bolsonaro appears ebullient in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday. Photo, Pilar Olivares/Reuters. You are my witnesses that this government will be a defender of the Constitution, democracy and liberty, and this is not just the promise of a party, or the empty words of a man, but an oath to God, he said in a televised address. Speaking from his home in Rio de Janeiro, where he has been recovering from a near-fatal stabbing earlier in the campaign. Flanked by his wife, a sign language interpreter and a black member of the armed forces, he promised to unite Brazilians, reaffirming his plans to reform public finances and negotiate more trade deals with developed nations. In a later video posted to Facebook, he said President Trump had called him to wish us good luck. Mr. Bolsonaro, a devout Christian who was recently baptized in the Jordan River, also prayed with evangelical leaders, as thousands of supporters gathered outside his home, setting off fireworks and waving Brazil's yellow and green national flag. We know he's not perfect, he's a human being like the rest of us, he says stupid stuff, he's intemperate, but even so he's the best hope we have for a better Brazil, said Eliana Falcao, a 41-year-old elementary school teacher, with green and yellow stripes painted on her face. Like many of Mr. Bolsonaro's supporters, she voted for the military man as a way to prevent the return of Mr. Haddad's Workers' Party. We want to get rid of this band of left-wingers, she shouted over the crowd's cheers. Throughout the campaign, Mr. Haddad, the stand-in candidate for former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was jailed this year for corruption, has struggled to overcome voters' hatred of the Workers' Party. It ruled Brazil for much of the past 15 years and oversaw the country's deepest recession on record, as well as the vast car wash corruption scandal. Speaking after the results Sunday, Mr. Haddad said he would continue to guard over his supporters, who fear Mr. Bolsonaro will set back gay and women's rights, bully political opponents and pose a threat to the country's young democracy. I saw the anguish and fear on many people's faces, but don't be afraid, we will be here. We will be with you, he said. Sunday's vote brings to an end one of the most turbulent election campaigns in Brazil's recent history, which has sparked rancorous feuds between families and friends. After surviving the assassination attempt in September, Mr. Bolsonaro, 63, has mostly campaigned from his Rio de Janeiro home, firing up supporters and taunting adversaries via social media. Meanwhile, Mr. da Silva has continued to call the shots for the Workers' Party from his police cell in southern Brazil, holding frequent tete-a-tete with Mr. Haddad, who registered as his lawyer to secure regular visitation rights. Fernando Haddad speaks to the press and supporters after confirming his defeat. Photo, Paulo Lopes/Zuma Press. I've never seen so much anger before, said Vanderlei Gages, a clinical psychologist in Brasilia for 25 years. Who said his patients have increasingly come to him after falling out with friends and work colleagues over the election. Mr. Bolsonaro's victory marks the rupture of a party system that was established after the end of military rule in the mid-1980s, mirroring both the rise of anti-establishment politics and populist nationalism across the world. Running for the previously little-known conservative PSL party, Mr. Bolsonaro is the first presidential winner since 1989 who isn't from the Workers' Party or Brazil's centrist PSDB party. Bolsonaro won the presidential election with a comfortable margin, riding on a strong anti-establishment wave of voter anger against Brazil's traditional parties and politicians, said Christopher Garman at political risk firm Eurasia Group, but adding that he would likely face a tough road ahead. Voter disenchantment means he will likely enjoy only a short honeymoon period, making it even harder to pass the deep fiscal reforms he has promised. Especially since he has vowed not to swap government posts for congressional support. His unorthodox campaign looks like it will translate to an unorthodox administration, said Mr. Garman. Mr. Bolsonaro's rise stunned pundits and rivals in recent months. Winning supporters ranging from billionaire city bankers to Amazon tribesmen, he appealed to voters across class and social divides, even converting scores of Mr. da Silva's former followers. His pledge to give police carte blanche to kill suspected criminals and arm civilians for self-defense found support in a country with nearly 64,000 murders last year. "I'm afraid to go out at night when it gets dark," said Raquel Nunes, 27, a secretary from São Paulo and an avid Mr. Bolsonaro supporter. But he's going to solve this, he's going to be firm. Talking didn't get us anywhere, so we need to respond with force. A champion of traditional family values, Mr. Bolsonaro gained support among evangelical Christians, now a third of Brazil's population, while his plan to open up the economy and cut public debt by 20% won him equally loyal disciples in the financial markets. Brazil's stocks and currency have risen more than 10% since mid-September on the prospect of his victory. But his comments advocating beating children to stop them from turning gay and arguing that women deserve lower salaries than men have appalled swaths of the electorate. That includes many of his own supporters, who say they backed the military man as the only available alternative to the Workers' Party. Mr. Bolsonaro's opponents fear his plans to ease environmental controls to boost mining and agricultural activities will have a devastating impact on the Amazon rainforest. 10 charts show why presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro won widespread support in a divided nation. View graphic. They also point to his public defense of torture and his choice of army generals for key government posts as a threat to democracy. But while many poorer voters still side with the Workers' Party and Mr. da Silva, Brazil's charismatic first working-class president, some say they are now willing to take a risk with Mr. Bolsonaro, hopeful he can restore order to the economy as well as the streets. "He's the only chance we've got for change," said Rafaela Teixeira, 42, a coconut water seller in Rio de Janeiro who grew up in one of the city's slums. "Brazil's soaring murder rate is bad for business," she said. "Foreigners don't want to come here anymore, and it's because of the lack of security and all the people dying in the middle of the street." Like many voters on Sunday, she said the impeachment in 2016 of Mr. da Silva's successor, Dilma Rousseff, had given her the confidence to try out a more radical president. Once Mr. Bolsonaro takes office on January 1, he will need to please the people to keep his job, Ms. Teixeira said. "If not, we'll take him by the collar and kick him out, just like we did with Dilma." Jeffrey T. Lewis and Paolo Trevisani contributed to this article. Write to Samantha Pearson at samantha.pearson@wsj.com and Luciana Magalhães at luciana.magalhães@wallstreetjournal.com. Appeared in the October 29, 2018, print edition.